The Mohawk Valley was basically the site of a civil war during the later years of the American Revolution. In our history classes, we're often taught about the Battle of Saratoga being the climax and ultimately the last battle in the Northern War. The Revolutionary War will shift south afterwards, we're taught. But if you do a little bit of research, you'll see that throughout 1778, 1779, 1781, 82, and right up to 83, the Mohawk Valley settlements are subjected to raids from the great Iroquois nations and the Tory people who had been neighbors with people like Mr. Clock, who built this fortified farmhouse. Now, this farmhouse, built of fieldstone, has been restored by the state of New York, and they've done a really nice job making me pretty happy to stop and visit it. And it's got here, beyond the fortified farmhouse, a restored communal oven over here. If you think about this fortified farmhouse with smaller windows and loopholes, right? Look at the loopholes. You could fire out of that loophole, right? In the event of an attack. You shutter those windows. You make this into a real fort. And this fort wasn't just for the family that lived here, but it was for the people that lived in the environs, maybe 2-3 miles away. They're farmers. They have a lot of land, a lot of acreage. And in the event of an attack, they rush to these fortified farmhouses. In King Philip's War, we call them garrison houses. And basically, they call them forts out here on the Mohawk Valley. The people in the Mohawk Valley are basically farmers, or people that work in support of farmers, like smiths. And the farmers are going to need to eat. And bread is the staple of all. And this is a communal oven built right next to Fort Clock. The idea of putting a communal oven next to a fortified farmhouse is to protect the community members who often travel for miles with their raw dough to make their bread here, and that bread will last them a week. The communal ovens became targets of attack and ambush up and down the Mohawk River, which is drifting east behind us as I speak. You imagine, not only do you have to worry about going to church, but you had to worry about baking bread, and it's not going to be a short process to bake, dozens of loaves of bread that are going to take care of you for the ensuing week or 2-week period. And there may be war parties out, and you may not be leaving your fortified farmhouse. So getting your bread baked safely was a big thing. It's cool to see this fortified oven here at Fort Clock showing us that they're not just thinking about the military aspects of this restoration, the loopholes and that good stuff. They're thinking about a little more peripheral things like the oven. At this point in history, much of the Mohawk Valley was just being opened up to settlement, with houses going up, many of which didn't have chimneys yet. So ovens were non-existent. It also probably makes sense that the Continental general least likely to miss a meal, Henry Knox, had discussed with Washington and other Patriot leaders the necessity of creating ordinance to take care of the bread situation, and actually gave some recipes for camp bread. Now, Philip Schuyler, commander of the Northern Department, would act on that, putting up bread ovens in critical locations up and down the theater under his command, knowing that he'd have to take on such men of fighting prowess as Joseph Brant or Tyandanega. These would be sorely pressed as we worked our way into the years following Saratoga, as Tories and native people raided up and down the valley, striking at random, and the need for bread baked and ready to go to support the militia and companies of Continentals increasingly coming in from Massachusetts under the command of Boston Brahmins, who expected a good loaf of bread, made the communal bread oven a common sight along the Mohawk Valley. So in the event of an attack on the region, people would rush to the forts, as they call them, up and down the Mohawk Valley. And one thing that they would need when they got to the fort would be an oven. And notice this oven, so close as it is to the fort, shows us the importance of protecting this. Because this is how they'd be able to turn the wheat that they grew in such abundance, because we are in the breadbasket of the American Revolution, the Mohawk Valley. They'd be able to take their raw dough from farmhouses all around and come to this oven and many others like it to make their weekly store of bread. During wartime, this was an essential thing, and these communal ovens became targets. Often they were located in town squares with no real defensive positions anywhere nearby. And if you read the stories of the war on the Mohawk Valley, you'll see that many of them were the site of awful ambushes. People out just making bread, right? Coming to make bread and being set upon by Tories and native people, or sometimes, the shoes on the other foot, by patriots. So this communal oven here outside Fort Clark shows us that in the case of Fort Clark, the people in this region would be able to safely secure necessary calories to get through the week in the form of bread because of such an oven. It's kind of a cool little bit of history, I guess, at a really awesome place to visit, spring, summer, winter, or fall, if you're ever in the Mohawk Valley in the area of Johnsonville, New York.